work.
I will call the regular town council meeting to order, and I will recognize myself as the pledge of allegiance on the occasion. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to come together this evening and to conduct the business of the town of Irmo. We thank you, Father, for each and every one here. And Lord, just give us wisdom in all that we do and all that we say. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
The first item on the agenda is the reading of the minutes from March 20th. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? There's one thing I noticed on the very last page, page 6, presentation of citizens, when Ms. Joan Mobley came up and spoke. It says address the concerns of the overstrut and the selection of the overstrut chairman. I think it was the overstrut administrator that she was speaking about tonight.
That's correct.
Yes. That is the only thing I really any other discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes with the change from chairman to administrator, do so with the showing of hands. All in favor. Administrative briefing, Mr. Brown, do you have anything on the agenda you'd like to add?
Just one document that I handed out, Mr. Mayor, that came from Chief Buck regarding mutual aid agreements with the surrounding police departments, just so we can recognize that we are in fact doing that. And the list is West Columbia Police Department, South Congaree, Columbia, Camden, and Springdale.
And we don't need to sign anything, we just...
No, sir, I don't believe so.
Just needs to be recognized in the minutes, Ron.
Okay, all right. Receipt of communication. We have a presentation of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Present with us tonight is Major John Tate, Lexington County Sheriff's Department. He is the Vice Chairman of the South Carolina Police Accreditation Commission, and he's here tonight to present us with our accreditation certificate, having completed our ambitious timetable. It was 3 years of effort. It is the beginning of a lot more work, but we have now been recognized as an accredited agency by the South Carolina PAC. Thanks to the hard work of Captain Joe Nates and all the members of our department. We are one of 9 agencies in the state that's accredited, considering that there are 289 agencies within the state. Being one of 9 is no small feat by the Irmo Police Department.
Chief, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it is a pleasure to stand here in front of you and bestow this award. The Irmo Police Department has demonstrated compliance with 255 standards set by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation. That represents best practices. Of course, as you have learned through the process, that requires a lot of work, a lot of time, money, but most importantly, I think it's a dedication to your citizens and your community that your police department is performing not only to a national standard but to a best practices. Those of you in business or in industry, this is very comparable in the law enforcement world to an ISO 9000 or 9001 type rate. Not only have they assured us they're doing this, we sent over a team of assessors who spent several days there, went over not only paperwork, talked to probably some of you members of your town, as well as the officers to indeed confirm they were following 255 best practice standards. Without further and with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I would like to publish the award.
Here.
Thank you. South Carolina Law Enforcement Accreditation Incorporated. The Irmo Police Department has demonstrated dedication to excellence and professionalism in South Carolina law enforcement through voluntary compliance to specific standards designed to enhance the professional delivery of law enforcement services, and is recognized as a leader in South Carolina law enforcement, is hereby awarded this certificate of accreditation, given this 22nd day of March in the year 2012, signed by John Tucker, Council Chair, and myself as Council Vice Chair. Congratulations, sir.
Big smile. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Sure. Thanks, sir. Good job. Thank you very much.
And I also, at this moment, wanted to recognize Senator Becky Knox in our audience here tonight. Thank you for attending. I don't know if you want to say anything or anything while you're here, or?
Oh, yeah, I might say something.
Yeah.
Don't do that, Artie. Everybody says don't ask me to say anything, because I will say something. But, Mr. Mayor and Council, it's an honor to be here tonight, and I just came by visiting, but I just want to say, whenever I first got elected to the Senate 12 years ago, this was my home base. I ran in this district up here in Senate District 23, and Ms. Condon was one of my big supporters, and Mr. Youngana, and Barry, I think Barry was one of my supporters. He didn't do anything against me, let's put it like that, but he's always been a friend of mine, and I appreciate everything that Irmo's ever done for me, and my roots was here. Being a young senator, I got elected, and I've always believed that Irmo is the place to be, and I've tried to do that. And even though I'm not your senator now, everybody at the railroad thinks I am, and everybody at DHEC thinks I am, and just about all the agencies. But you know, they said we couldn't move the railroad. We were paying the railroad to plant our trees, and now the railroad's paying us to plant the trees. We got it cleaned up. We got, in fact, they called me today to tell me that the steel rails was being moved, and I rode up here to see. And doggone, there wasn't a truck and a little car on the railroad track, and had a crane picking up the steel down here. But you know, for a long time, people on the railroad always think they can mess with these little small towns and not have to do anything, but they found out that Irmo's on the map, and Irmo's a town to be proud of, and the citizens up here, you know, got a right to have peace and private and quiet, peace and quiet, and you know, them trains sitting out there running for 24 hours a day, sitting on the track, keeping everybody up, they have to answer to that. So, but I just always appreciate everything that Irmo does for its people, and especially everything you've done for me, and thank you.
Thank you.
No, don't leave just yet. Couple things that I wanted to say. I know you won't toot your own horn. You're always going to talk.
Oh yeah.
That's well known.
Except when my wife is around.
Well, I've heard you, just like me, you get the last word in your house, and that's yes, ma'am.
That's it.
So, but seriously, Irmo owes you a great deal of gratitude with what you've done with the railroad, but also what you have been instrumental in doing with the veterans part that we're getting underway. You've helped us make a gigantic leap in that, and probably very few people know about that, but without you, we couldn't be where we are today and where we're looking forward to going, recognizing the veterans that are in foreign lands fighting for our right to be here. And I, for one, want to thank you for that. On behalf of the town, we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. And Irmo's always been very strong in its help for veterans. I know whenever they was, the 251st was going overseas and I needed help,
to raise money to bring them home for Christmas because they weren't going to be able to go but 50 miles from camp, and the family was going to have to go to Atlanta. And Jake Moore helped me raise money and helped me get sponsors and stuff like that to raise the money to bring all those troops from the 251st to South Carolina to the armories that they come from and carry them back. And the families got to spend time with them for Christmas. We started out just like anything, I guess, in government. Started out $40,000. Well, that wasn't a drop in the bucket. We found, I think Jake raised $40,000 in 2 days. And then it went to 80. Then it went to 120. Then it went to 165,000. So, but we were able to get every soldier that wanted to come home. And the reason it went up, the soldiers had given up hope to come home, and they just said, you know, I'm just going to go on over there, and I don't have the money to come home. And when they found out that we were serious about bringing them home, General Honorary, I put in a call to him, and he called me back from the battleground in Iraq on a mobile cell phone. And not only did he get permission for us to bring them home, but he gave them a couple extra days leave. And he thought it was just great that South Carolina thought of this veterans like that. Of course, he was from Louisiana, and he was a real soldier, and he believed in the veterans. And you know, our veterans, as you said, do a lot for this country. And I'm a Vietnam vet, and I swore that whenever I got out of Vietnam, we wasn't appreciated. People were spitting on us. They didn't spit on me but one time, and I took him down. But you know, but they would spit on you. They would disgrace the flag. And I swore that I'd never, ever, if I could help it, let that happen again. And our veterans would be always honored and recognized for the job they do, because they do a big sacrifice when they go overseas and leave their families to be one-parent families whenever they don't know whether they're coming home or not. Mama's missing them, children's missing them. It's a void in the child's life, and the community come forward. And Irmo was one of the leaders in doing it. And I just always, I tell you, I hated to leave Irmo. That's the reason I guess I still keep coming up here. But I do appreciate that, and thank you for your kind words.
Yes, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other received communication? Next item is the presentation by citizens. This is the time where, for things that are on the agenda, the citizens would like to come comment, share something with it. This is the time to do so. Is anyone here who would like to speak to the town council on anything that's on the agenda tonight? Being none. Next item is unfinished business. Items A, second reading of an ordinance, 1204, to annex 9 properties out on Highway 6 and Irmo Drive. Is there a motion for second reading?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And I think Bob said they met, the planning commission met last night. It approved the annexation with one what's the word I'm thinking of, change on one of the properties that they felt like should be commercial office. We can either accept that, or we can move forward with all of them as a CG. Right now, the second reading is for all of them to be CG. I don't know if there's any discussion on that other property, or just leave it as is and move forward. I think Bob said he spoke to the people at the property, and they do want it to be CG as well, from my understanding.
People who own the property?
Yeah.
Okay.
And everything else around them, from what I understand, except for that, you're still on that yellow sheet, that's what kind of behind it is residential. That's also that neighborhood that is built right behind Woodlands, which is a general commercial right in front of me, so I don't know that one more would make a big difference in anything. Any other discussion? All in favor of second reading, to annex this property with CG zoning for all 9 tracts, I think it is. 9. Do so with showing of the hand. All in favor?
And those will all be general
CG.
commercial?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanna make sure.
And then, second reading of an ordinance 1205 to amend their town code to change the smoking in public places. Is there a motion for second reading?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of second reading, do so with show of hand. And under new business, our town ordinance says, as of right now, anything or immediately following the meeting after inauguration, which is the one we had last meeting, when Kathy got inaugurated, we have to reappoint our municipal clerk, town attorney, and town judge. So is there a motion for appointment of the municipal clerk?
Mr. Mayor, this is unusual in that we've never done it this way before, to my knowledge, but I do have something, as you said, a little later in the agenda that will correct this.
Right.
But I would like to appoint Ms. Kim Stanley as our municipal clerk.
Second.
Any discussion? All ready? All in favor? And the appointment of town attorney. Is there a motion for appointment?
Mr. Mayor, I likewise would like to again appoint our town attorney, who's done an outstanding job for us for many, many years. That being little Jake Moore and his law firm, Moore, Taylor, Thomas.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And town judge.
Mr. Mayor, I likewise would like to reappoint our town judge, Mickey Epting, who has served the town well for many years as town judge.
And is there a second?
Second.
And all in favor? And item D, first reading of an ordinance 1206 to add amendments to the agenda and executive session. Is there a motion for first reading?
I'm sorry?
In a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, being its first reading, just to make it clear, there's a couple items that was on the agenda, been on the agenda for many years, and only after some research within the town code, we realized that it weren't spelled out, and we're using a lot of time now to update our town code and get it tweaked to work right. So I'm suggesting these two changes to put them back on the agenda in their proper place so that we won't be called on that.
Any other discussion? All ready to vote? All in favor, do so show of hand. And first reading of an ordinance 1207, our landlord of residential real estate ordinance. Is there a motion for first reading of that? And second.
Second.
And
I'm sorry. I jumped the gun, it was your bad.
any discussion?
Well, this is, as some of you may or may not know, I have a listserv that I reach out to a good many of the citizens out in Irmo. And this seems to be one of the complaints that I'm getting is their neighbors, a lot of these rental houses are in disrepair, constantly in disrepair. Other issues that follow that, cars parked in the yard, and it's bringing down the neighborhood. And, you know, so we took a tour on Saturday, a 3-hour tour. And Barry Walker and Jay Moore, we went out riding and see if this is true. And it is. So I just got a few slides I'd like to show you. It's not going to be an all-day slideshow movie today, but of some of the things that we're seeing. And here we go. Just if you can see the monitor up there, we'll start. All right. That we see a lot of roofs are in disrepair. Mold, mildew, rot on the siding of these houses. Don't know if it's a rental or owner of this house, but this is prevalent throughout neighborhoods. This is a dormer about to fall down. Paint peeling off. This is discolored, you know, the roof is getting discolored, but the yard is pretty neat. This is the siding of the house. This is right north of Royal Tower. Painting, no paint. Again, no paint. And, I believe that house was vacant. These are areas of town that grass should be growing, but it's not. This is the corner of Lake Murray, excuse me, not Lake Murray Boulevard, but Briarsgate Boulevard and Royal Tower. This is where that church is located. Here's some other areas that are just washed out, no grass growing, stumps in the yard, and the famous curvies. This is a lot of houses with broken up shutters. Some shutters don't even exist. I know these houses are relatively new compared to other houses in that neighborhood. The paint's fading, garbage can out front. Now these are, we're not nitpicking, this is complaints that we're receiving that everybody wants the improvement in their neighborhood. There's a lot of houses in these neighborhoods actually have great looking yards. I was quite impressed. Here we got car parked. Now I don't know if it had a tag or not. It's a car just parked off there in the grass. It's parked in the yard again, parked in the yard. Basketball goals just laid around in the front yard of this vehicle in the front yard. Another area with barren grass, barren land, excuse me. You can't see it here, but there's a fireplace or some type of outdoor, what do you call that? Barbecue, that's right. Garbage cans in the front. Hot water heater, old hot water heater, garbage can. This is rotten wood. This is just junk piled right beside the house, right from the road. You probably can see it. See a lot of mailboxes that are about to fall down. This house had, oh yeah, the siding down here, grass, bushes not kept, and these dormers. Yeah. This one's got bushes not being kept, grass is tall, and this faded door. We don't know if it is either moving in or moving out, but it looks like they're trying. Half the yard look okay, I guess, and the rest of it doesn't. These are sofas moved out to the front porch, indoor furniture out to the front, and I hope y'all would think that does not belong. Basketball goals in the street, permanent erection here right in the street. Basketball goal here. This is for children, obviously, because it's shorter, playing in the street. There's another one, I guess it was for a full court press in the street. We have steps about to fall down. These steps are leaning. These steps are about to fall in. Long furniture out front, mailboxes barely hanging up there. We talk about street cleaning. Later on, we see all this pine straw going down into the curb. outdoor fixture needs repairing. This is
A tree growing.
over 12 inches of grass and weeds growing up. In the back of this house is even worse. Now this house, same house. A lot of pine straw, a lot of leaves, a lot of pine cones on top of the roofs, as this house is here. This gutter empties out all this water in these bags of leaves that's been there for a while. And the covers on cars, that's prevalent throughout the neighborhood. Now this right here is a electrical underground wiring. And whoever's responsible should be maintaining it because the homeowner cannot. This is a tarp on top of the house. I don't know how long this tarp's been here, but it covers the entire house. And this tarp covers this area. It must be the chimney, but again, we don't know how long it's been there, but it's not good for the neighborhood. Logs stacked up in the front. People just dump, and it's just there. This house was a burned out situation, and y'all can probably tell me how long this house has been like this. And, oddly enough, the yard is kept real nice.
I found out that house burned down about 3 months ago.
3 months
And
ago.
that the people are actually coming and working on it and leaving. But there is an ordinance in place, isn't there already, to say that if your house burns down, you got 30 days to raise it?
I think the fire department has certain requirements for that.
I think, I was trying to look in our ordinance to see if there was, and I couldn't find it, but I believe we have an ordinance for that already. It's not being enforced.
This is more rotten wood. It looks like an attempt was made to fix it. This is a vacant lot that a house once was here, and nothing's been done at all to keep it up, as well as this place, vacant lot. These are sticks and branches over 3 feet long. I assume the garbage will not pick them up because of the length of the branches, so they sit. This is a Columbia police car. Don't know if they're visiting or they're just live there, but anyway, a lot of folks' yards apparently are not well kept. We have buckets all packed here, stacked here, buckets and moped underneath the cover, camper out front. You can't already see this, but it's a satellite dish, out in the front yard. These are tires right here. And this is just, can't really see it, but there's a utility trailer here, badminton court back over here, and the driveway is just falling apart, breaking apart. Cars with tarps. This is the front. And all these pictures are from the roadside, of course, when you go to the backyards of people's homes. This could be, possibly a disabled or elderly person, which is something we have to address. But this is a handicap ramp or a disabled ramp, and certainly something has to be, accommodated for our elderly people. The sign was covered up to protect the innocent. This is a house for sale, and this is grass and weeds just growing in the road, in the curb, to stop the flow of water. And that's it. So, this is a start with this ordinance. I believe I would like to see it go to the planning commission to be thoroughly studied and see if it needs to be improved. This is a start of this ordinance, and I would just think we just need to build upon it. We'll have our public hearing, just get as much input as we possibly can to make it better. That's all.
Yeah, again, I observed a lot of things and agree with you in wholeheartedly on everything that we talked about here. There's two major areas of concern that I think we need to look at. One is the roof's conditions and setting up some kind of a program or something that would help folks with these roofs. Private gate is what, 40, 50 years old, so those roofs are probably 40, 50 years old. In this economic condition we're in right now, people probably don't have $10,000 all the way around to replace their roofs, but I'm sure that we can come up with something as a town to assist homeowners, whether they're the ones that own the homes, if that's the situation, to getting those roofs repaired and fixed. Now, if they're renters, if these are investment homes, and it's totally outside the ball of what I'm talking about. But the people that actually live there and can't afford to do it, we can come up with some kind of program or something in an ordinance or in the scheme of putting the ordinance together before we come down hard on folks and say, hey, your roofs need to be, in disrepair, it needs to be fixed, you can't have a tarp on it. As far as that house that burned down, there is an ordinance that says if your house burns down, you have to raise it within 30 days or something like that. I don't know where it is, I don't know if that's the fire department or if that's the town of Irmo. But the house that burned down in my neighborhood, the guy was told that you have to raise it within 30 days. And I know that ordinance exists, because he was getting on me and saying, I don't have 30 days to do it, I can't find a contractor to do all that, but he did. I remember in council, we leveled the house that was on that same street, and that's that vacant lot you saw there?
Yes.
I remember we leveled that house, so we took and destroyed it and made it a vacant lot. Left the address, the mailbox there, but we tore the house down. I don't know, it took us a while, we were on council, I think it took us it was a nuisance for a while, but we did it. I think code enforcement needs to be looked at. We have ordinances already on the books that are not being enforced. We need to get those enforcement efforts going. I think it's our sanitation department or advanced disposal need to work with the town, and we've got a new contract coming up here pretty soon. But we can talk to them about this 3 feet length thing. We saw a lot of wood that could have been picked up. Those are not 3 foot big limbs. There are a lot of little branches that could be easily thrown on the back of the truck, but yeah, they were bigger than, or they were longer than 3 feet, so they were left there. Those things can be cleaned up. A lot of bags of yard trash, for whatever reason, didn't get picked up, didn't get brought to the street for whatever reason. Those things can be picked up by the sanitation, advanced disposal in their yard debris day or whatever, or we can talk to them about beefing up that part of sanitation.
Even appliances, maybe just.
Appliances, right.
Get them off the street.
Get them off the street. The thing with couches on the front yard, the front porch, that's a no-brainer. If they don't want them anymore, put them on the street, let's take them away. If they can't, they're not getting picked up, and that's why they're left there. I don't know. We need to get with our disposal, our sanitation folks and say, hey, give us a schedule or give us a day that you'll do this, and make sure we communicate that with the town.
They do pick them up, they
Couches and stuff like that?
just make a special arrangement, you have to call them, and then they'll make a special arrangement to pick up big items, washing
Okay.
machines, dryers.
The problem you got with those, though, is that people are basically using interior furniture as furniture for the front porches. And it obviously attracts water and mildew, and gosh knows what it looks like to death.
Well, certainly we can, again, the code enforcement person should went by the house and say, hey, you can't have that out there. If that hasn't happened, then it needs to happen. If it did happen, and nothing's been done, then we got a problem with our code enforcement. The painting was another major area. We saw a lot of carpentry, I call it minor carpentry work, the shutters and stuff, and just, you go to Home Depot and get some new ones and put it on the house and paint it. But painting and the minor carpentry stuff, I don't know, is there a law against having a handyman? Do we have to license a handyman? Do we have to have a business license for that being a handyman? Maybe we can talk to some people and say, hey, well, we have a handyman's contractor or something that we can refer you to help you with that, you know, if you need to. Again, this is for the homeowners, not the renters, not the people that have investment homes, okay? You know, I agree with you with the ordinance completely, but I'm saying that we need to be careful that we don't put such a burden on the homeowners.
I agree.
That puts us, you know, makes them feel like second-class citizens because they don't have the money to fix the roof or they don't have the money to paint the house, you know. I mean, you know, it costs me a lot of money to paint my house, and I got a brick house, you know. But I do it, you know, because I do it a little bit every weekend until it gets done. But a lot of people don't have much to do that, so.
You know, there's a statement here that Chief Buck would like to discuss with us in conjunction with this ordinance about changing the enforcement from criminal to civil misdemeanor. So are you ready to discuss that?
If council's willing to listen to me, I'll be happy to talk. I'm not quite up to the standards of Senator Knotts, but I'll talk if you want to give me the opportunity. I'm looking through the slideshow that you presented. There are a lot of houses that look bad. The way our city code is currently structured is a criminal violation to do that. It's a 30-day misdemeanor. And where we as a police department have a difficulty is, are we going to take somebody, ultimately, do we feel like taking somebody off to jail for what we see is the right thing to do? And I'll tell you, I don't feel that putting people in jail for being poor, not being able to paint their house or fix their roof is the right thing for this town to do. If I'm mistaken in that, then that's solely my fault. I think that another option for us, depending on what the city attorney has to say, is to, instead of focusing on a person, which is what a criminal violation does, we have to have a person that we can charge with doing something improper, whether it's letting the grass grow or not fixing the roof or leaving the trash out. We focus on the property as the problem, make it a civil violation, where, you know, it doesn't make any difference if it's a landlord investment home or if it's a owner-occupied dwelling. The property is the focus, not the person. Then we can issue civil fines for a violation of this, and if it continues, City Council can deem the property to be a public nuisance and then move against it that way. I think it removes the person out of the...
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You cannot do that. The problem you have is that the town court has zero civil jurisdiction. So if you issue a civil fine, there is no way to basically enforce it. You can't enforce it in the town court because the town court doesn't have civil jurisdiction. The way this thing is designed is to begin attacking the problem several fold. The way it's designed is to, first of all, go after the slumlord, the landlord, simply the rental properties, and just say, look, we love you. If you want to do business here in town by renting property, that's great. But if you rent property to one of our citizens in Irmo, you're going to give that person a habitable and decent place to live for the money you're getting. So this starts out with basically saying you are a landlord, you are taking money. I mean, obviously, if you bring an action against somebody with the only jurisdiction we have, which is criminal jurisdiction, obviously the goal is not to put somebody in jail. Basically, there's always the option of a fine, which, I mean, our town court almost never puts anybody in jail. They always levy a fine. To me, you start out with the landlord, you start out with having it a misdemeanor, but you make the landlord responsible for policing his own property.
Well, we don't have anything on the books now that separates owner-occupied dwellings from landlord.
That's what this does.
And I agree with separating that out. I think that landlords should be held, they're a business, just like any other business in town, and should be regulated as business. You know, they are earning an income off of a piece of property, no different than the gentleman who owns Zaxby's is earning an income from his property. It's a business.
I'm not sure that you want to take a homeowner, an owner-occupied property, and tell the person that we're going to put you in jail for not fixing your roof.
Correct.
But that's where our code is now.
That's right.
Is we have to build a case to a criminal standard.
That's right.
Which is where we are now.
But this goes to a businessman, a landlord, and it basically says to the landlord, you are responsible. It's just like any other business in town. And I think that what you do is, the way this thing is designed is, this is step number one. You basically have a criminal enforcement dealing with we've got 750 rental houses in this town. That's a lot. If this step number one is in place, we already know which of those 750 houses are rental houses. We can identify each one of them. Then step number two is to come back in, I think, and to address an overall, you can't put your couch on the front porch. You can't park the car. Nobody can park a car off the grass in the front yard. But we basically, I think, toned down the criminal sort of nature of those offenses to where you're levying fines or doing something, but you're basically trying to be a whole lot easier on the homeowner. And then the third step, number three, I think, is what Barry's talking about. If there was any way, in the name of goodness, that we could have people who are authorized vendors of roofs, siding, and landscaping in town, that we have them apply to us with rates that we have published that are basically discounted rates for a large number of business. And if we could find a lender somewhere who we could basically back to be giving second mortgages or low interest rate loans on houses, I don't know if we can use, there's some programs I understand through state housing that might work.
That I wouldn't have any idea about that. I'm, solely concerned with an enforcement part of it. If it is an investment property and we're going to continue to do criminal enforcement, if there's a contract between the landlord and the tenant where the landlord is responsible for the landscaping, I'm not sure that we could criminally enforce a contract and go and issue the violation against the landlord.
We're not going to enforce any contracts. What we're saying is, Mr. Landlord, you are responsible for your property.
Right. But when it comes to I'll use a theoretical homeowner, investment property owner in Ohio, who owns 3 houses as rental properties here in New Friarsgate, and they're vacant, he has not been able to rent them, and the yard has grown up, how are we going to enforce that? He has no tenant, we have nobody, because I can tell you, with all due respect to City Council, I don't think they want me footing the bill to travel to Ohio to bring this gentleman back here for a code enforcement.
What we do at that point in time is we enforce our lien law, and we've already got a law in the books that allows us to go in and cut the grass and to file a lien. We do that. On that situation, we basically have the property declared to be a nuisance.
Right.
We do an order by publication, and by golly, if we have to, we foreclose against the dog.
And my position is we do that consistently with all of the properties in town and not have a bifurcated system where we're going after some people criminally and we're going after some people civilly.
I love you to death, but those landlords who are putting those sorts of houses and putting our citizens in substandard housing,
they should not do
by
that.
God, they shouldn't do that, and that ought to be a crime in the town of Irmo. We ought to enforce it as a crime. We ought to have our town judges being very, very aware of the fact that this is something that needs to have teeth, and we ought to basically have law enforcement basically making those cases aggressively. If we can do that, if we can get rid of 750 problem houses, and let's assume that half of them, 375, are problem houses, and I'll bet it's more like 90% of them. In 18 months, Friarsgate, especially Friarsgate, can have a 20 to 30% increase in the quality of life for the people who live there, I believe. But I may be wrong, I just work here.
Well,
at least for now.
You and I are in the same boat.
Yes, sir.
I agree that we need to hold people responsible for their property, whether it is owner occupied or landlord occupied. I think it's personally, I think it's unfair to treat an owner-occupied dwelling differently than a landlord-occupied dwelling, where we're going to tell the person who owns that house that they could, in theory, go to jail for not cutting their grass, but we're going to tell the landlord-owned house that all we're going to do is foreclose on your property and take it from you.
Well, I think that, again, I believe this is like a 3 or 4 step process. I think that once you get the landlord ordinance in place, then you need to come back and do an ordinance which basically addresses the owner-occupied property. I'm not sure at that point in time you want to tell an owner who doesn't have any money and is not getting money out of the house that we're going to put you in jail for not putting a new roof on the house. But I think you can tell an owner, you're not going to park on the grass. You are going to park on the driveway. You're not going to have couches on your porch. And if you've got a garage full of garbage, you're going to close the garage door, and you're going to keep your fences up, and you're going to have the place look civil so you're not impacting your neighbors. But I think that the standard for the slumlord or the landlord property should be a different standard than the owner-occupied. I would highly recommend that once they get the landlord properties in place, that they pass, or they consider passing another ordinance that would basically deal with the owner-occupied houses. What sort of enforcement mechanism they want to put on the owner-occupied houses, I think remains a good topic of debate. But when we talk about people doing business here and basically raping the community to take a dollar bill out and harming the people who are living in the houses as well as the neighbors, I don't have any problem putting a criminal violation on that and enforcing it through our law enforcement as well as our town court, and asking our town judges to be not onerous but aggressive in regard to making sure that these properties are cleaned up and brought up to a rational and reasonable standard. You know, Brian, when you go into Friarsgate and you ride around and you see somebody who's trying so hard to maintain a home they've lived in for 20 or 30 years, and next door they got couches on the front porch, the roof falling in, logs piled up in the yard, stumps. It's horrible. And I know I wouldn't want to live next to that. And we're having people moving out. We had the people last week who came in, and that's exactly what they were talking about. You know, I'm not going to go so far as to say that it's a slum. It's not. It's not a hood. The neighborhood still has 80 to 85% of the houses are probably well-maintained, beautiful, nice homes. But about 15% of those houses aren't. I mean, those photographs we've got to fix that.
I agree with you. I think fixing is what we need to do. Where I differ, in my opinion, with you is creating one standard for part of our community and another standard for a different part of our community. And I think it would be unfair to put a police officer in the middle of the debate between this person rents their house, and so we're going to go very aggressively against the landlord, but the person next door does not, owns their house. There are 2 people living next door, one owns, one doesn't, and we're going to treat them differently.
But 90%
even though they're next door to each other and they're still in the name.
But 90% of the problem houses are the rental houses.
Yeah, but we got owners too, Jay.
It's not whether it's landlord owned or resident owned. It's we're treating the same people 2 different ways based on whether they own the house or they rent the house. And you could have 2 identical houses with 2 difficulties sitting next door to each other. If one is owner occupied and one is landlord owned, we're going to treat those 2 people differently. It's very difficult for our police officers to enforce that.
I understand that, but it's very easy to identify which house is a rental house and which house is not.
Just go to the 6% tax.
That's right. And once you've determined that it's a rental house, I don't have any problem having a stricter standard on a business person than a person who's just trying to live.
Yeah, but Chief Buck is saying for the average beat officer on the road, he has to go to a house and say, well, wait a minute, you're a renter, or you're renting this house, so you got to get a fine. But this guy next to you owns the house, so we're going to work with you and try to get you some financial help to get yourself fixed.
But we're not going to find the person that lives there. person we're gonna
That's what I'm saying,
find.
that's unfair, that's what he's saying is
But
unfair.
we're not gonna find the person that lives there. We're gonna find the owner.
But you have two different penalties for the same problem. Because one person owns the property, there's one person rents.
That's true.
Well, actually, both properties are owned. One's owned by an investor, one's owned by a homeowner.
That's
They're
right.
both owned by someone.
No, but one,
We're not addressing the
But we're not-
renter, we're addressing the homeowner in either case.
but one of the person that owns the property is gonna get some relief, if you will, or try to be worked with. And the person that rent is gonna get the gauntlet thrown at his landlord. And that's what Buck is saying, that the beat cop has gotta make that decision, rather than aggressively enforce that. And that's what I don't want us to do, is to have something on it that's gonna be hard to be enforced, or perceived to be hard to be enforced by the officer.
It's easy to, that's easy to be enforced. All he's gotta do is, if he's got a problem house, he looks at it, calls town hall, and speaks to the town administrator, is this a 6% or 4% assessed property? Immediately you know that's either owner occupied or rented. That's easy. So enforcing this is easy. The real question is, do you want to treat the landlords who are doing business different than an ordinary homeowner? Now, if you want to basically, again, y'all passed the laws. I spent 3 hours Saturday morning in the car having a great time riding around taking pictures. But, I mean, if we want to basically make the standard not only just for landlords, but to any owner, you know, okay. But now you start talking about Miss Jones, who's 90 years old with a shut-in, and, you know, she's got a problem with her roof or her siding, and she ain't got any money, and she can't fix it, and no source of money. And now you're talking about criminally prosecuting her for basically being poor. I got a problem with that. But
Well, that's if we have a, you know, a law that's unilateral across the board for everybody. But what we're talking about here is not that, we're talking about a landlord.
That's right.
Ordinance, right? That's what we're talking about, just the landlord, the landlord ordinance.
That's right.
We're not talking about the owner occupied property.
That's right.
So that situation would never happen by Ms. Jones.
That's
Ms.
right.
Shut-in, well, maybe not, if Ms. Jones is renting, yes. But Ms. Jones is the owner, it wouldn't happen to her.
And that's why.
But if Ms. Jones is renting, it needs to happen to her owner.
Exactly.
I agree, I mean, do you agree with that, Chief?
I have no problem enforcing landlords as a business, registering them as a business. They should pay for a business license and then be held to higher standards. There are several cities in South Carolina that do that. Most notable that I know, Clemson does that because they have so much student housing off campus. The city of Clemson has stringent inspection rules for residential property that is absentee owned. And I think City of Columbia does that also. Where, using Mrs. Jones as an example, if she's renting the house and we go after the landlord, that's great and fine, we do that. But if she's not renting the house, and she doesn't have money to fix it up, and we don't aggressively pursue her because she owns the house and she's 90 years old and shut in, we're gonna have the same issue, where Ms. Jones can't afford to fix the roof, can't afford to paint the house so it looks in disrepair, but we're going after the landlord, and his house now looks nice. And he's gonna come after us and say, I can't get good rent for the house because Ms. Jones, who can't afford to do all this stuff, is not getting it fixed. And the police department's stuck in the middle between one system of enforcement against landlords, which is fine, I'm not arguing we should not have one. But we're gonna be stuck in between a system of enforcement for landlords that we're not pursuing against residents, and we're creating a double standard. And if that's what City Council wants to do, you know, that's y'all's decision. It will be being in somebody's front yard, listening to them berate us, all, which they do now because they're issuing them an abatement notice for their tall grass. And well, how tall is too tall? How many pots of dead plants can I have? And we have to fight that battle all the time. It's going to be exacerbated because we have to say, well, do you own this house or do you rent this house? Well, the first question I'm going to say, what difference does it make to you? Well, I'm going to treat you nicer if you own it. Well, of course I own it. Well, I'm going to treat you more harshly if you rent it. I need to know your landlord's name. Well, get stuffed. I'm not going to tell you. It's his problem, not mine. So it's creating an issue, I agree that we should regulate businesses. And if they are a landlord and they own several investment houses, they should be regulated, should get a business license. It gives us a point of contact. I'm leery of a dual enforcement system, one for landlords, one for residents, where it's a hybrid, we're gonna put you in jail, maybe not really put you in jail sort of thing. I would prefer that we come up with one, either we're gonna make it a civil violation and we pursue it civilly, which we could do against landlords because they're a business, or we make it a criminal violation for everybody and pursue it criminally for everybody.
You cannot make it civil and enforce it in the town court. I don't know how many times I got to say that, because our town court has no civil jurisdiction. So the only way you can enforce anything in our town court is to basically have a criminal statute. Now, we could make it civil and attempt to enforce it in our magistrate's court. So what you basically have is the town of Irmo versus, Mr. Landlord. But it's not going to be a double standard. We're simply enforcing this ordinance against landlords, and we don't have to ask the tenant who the landlord is. We have a record of who the landlord is already at town hall. We know his name and his contact information and his address. It's very, very simple to basically have the contact. And, I don't have any problem at all. And again, this is going to be more work for the town. But I don't have any problem at all if we want to build into the ordinance, a notification provision where we basically have to give them notification of some sort before issuing a citation or something. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the issuance of of the summons instead of going out and arresting somebody. But if you, once the precautions of trying to be nice have worn away and they're thumbing their nose at you saying go to places, I don't have any problem prosecuting. And I'll prosecute all 750 of them if that's what it takes.
Yeah, but what if the guy lives in Cleveland, Ohio, and his owns 3 houses here and he's not playing ball with us? I mean, Chief's got a point. I don't want him to fly to Cleveland to arrest somebody or bring him back here for arresting him.
We've had that circumstance.
Yeah, we did.
We've had that circumstance, and what we have done in the extreme circumstances, I think we had a house over, wasn't the one in Hill Creek we had where the people, God knows where?
Peru.
Yeah, we had to basically we actually hired a process server in Ohio to go and serve our summons in Ohio, but by golly, we served him, and he showed up in court. But if that doesn't work, at that point in time, we can turn to our nuisance ordinance, and we can bring a civil action in the circuit court, and we can serve them by publication and basically secure a lien against the property. But we've got to fix this problem some way. If we don't fix this problem, the new Friarsgate subdivision will eat this community. And I may be wrong about that.
We have a mechanism to use it civilly. The city attorney just outlined it for us. We can serve notice by publication, we can attach liens to the property, we can condemn it as a nuisance and ultimately foreclose and take possession of it.
Can you really do that though? Can you really take that?
You can. The process, as we have seen, is incredibly cumbersome.
Yeah,
It entails a $150 summons and complaint. It files an attempt at service process. If you can't get process service, then it entails service by publication in the newspaper, which is expensive. Then a full-fledged court hearing before a circuit judge, and then an order for whatever relief the court wants to give you. Then once you get your lien, then your only recourse is to turn around and foreclose against the property and have it sold in some fashion, which really becomes cumbersome.
But if
You got to go through the process all over again.
If you have a lien for, let's say, $10,000 roof, okay, against the property certainly is worth more than $10,000. You try to foreclose on a house that's worth $150,000, and you only get $10,000 into that. How does that work?
Your problem is, the first thing you're going to have to do is a title search, full-blown title search of the property.
So
Because if you're going to foreclose, then you got to figure out who the mortgage company is. Who else has liens against the property? If you got your $10,000 lien and you find there's a first mortgage on the property for $150,000 and the property is only worth $150,000, you're basically in a position of trying to foreclose against a piece of property that's worthless. The easiest, and again, it may take a little bit of work, and it may take some additional code enforcement, but the absolute most efficient way to clean up the problem we have is if you assume that 90% of your problem houses are rental houses, a mechanism where you can simply issue a court summons and bring the landlord in and say, you're responsible for the business you do in town, you will not harass your neighbors, and you will not rape your tenants. If you're going to take money out of Irmo, then by golly, what you have in Irmo is going to be up to legitimate standards. Any method you use is going to take work. It's going to take work by law enforcement. It's going to take work from us. So you got two choices. You either do something or you do nothing. And if you do nothing, it's going to fall down. It's going to get worse. The most efficient mechanism that I can conceive is what Councilman Younger has just introduced. I could be wrong. If someone will show me a more efficient method, I know that the civil fines will not work. I know that. I can tell you that. We have no jurisdiction over a civil fine. So the only mechanism we have is what has been introduced. If someone will show me something better, I'm all ears. And I would highly recommend that you take Mr. Younger's advice, send it to the Planning Commission and get their input, have a public hearing and see what the public thinks, and amend that any way humanly possible. But if you will follow this, and if you clean up those rental houses, 90% of your problems, especially in New Friarsgate, will go away within 18 months, in my humble opinion. And all you got to do is look at those photographs or ride through that neighborhood like we did, Barry. That lady in here last week was right. Now, it's not a hood, but
I think she used the term ghetto.
yeah, it's not a ghetto. New Friarsgate's a nice place to live. But there are, what would you estimate, 15% of the houses a problem?
At the most, I mean,
10% maybe.
I can take her to the ghetto and drop her off and show her exactly what the ghetto looks like. But at the same time, this has to be understood that this is a landlord ordinance, not a general ordinance for everybody.
Right.
Right. And that's what we're doing tonight.
Well, I think, and that's what we'll give you my 2 cents. We have ordinances on the books now, the unsightly, unsanitary, where we do deal with grass that's too tall. And what too tall is a matter of opinion in many cases. We have other situations that were depicted in these photographs. Cars parked on the grass. Maybe there's no grass in the yard, it's all pine straw. That may be the natural look that they want. It's obvious to look at that and kind of tell. But I think if we deal with those simple problems first, and that way we can deal with everybody on the same level. With an abatement notice or whatever we want to, however we want to attack this thing, if the code enforcement officer sees the garbage can in the middle of the front yard and 30 bags of garbage up next to the house, the simple solution for that is for the property owner to take it to the street. We pay a premium price to get it picked up. It may be just that they need to know that it can be picked up. I can't imagine someone living there, going away every day. Some may not leave their home every day. They may be this shut in, you know, and has to wait for a grandchild to come and move their car, whatever the reason. If we attack those simple problems first, we stop the cars from parking in the yards. We stop people from changing the engine in their car and the transmission in the front yard. And we make sure that the garbage can gets put where the garbage can needs to be, and that the painter doesn't put 35-gallon buckets on his driveway so he can't park the car there, and he's got to park his truck in the front yard. If we stop some of that, I'm thinking that your 750 may go down to that 375 real quick.
Sure.
And I don't think that we have to really make a distinction between a landlord and a resident owner. But if we proceed with our landlord ordinance and we identify our landlords and we license them just like we license insurance agents, garages, zippy marts, convenience stores, insurance salesmen, real estate companies, if we license them, then we have an opportunity with that business license to give them something that kind of lets that landlord know what the town's policies are. And that if their tenant doesn't abide by those, that we're going to come looking to them. And does it sound workable?
I don't want anybody to think I'm opposed to licensing landlords as a business. We're not. I think that's a grand idea. I think it's one that's been needed here for a while. And we have no problem enforcing any ordinance that City Council deems fit to pass. You know, if you pass an ordinance that says there is no parking on grass, you have to park in your driveway, we will write 8 billion tickets to enforce that. The only concern I have, and it's not one that's, you know, I don't want to be the speed bump of progress, is we build a case based on it being a criminal case. Ultimately, we're going to present a case to a judge where that judge could say, you're going to jail.
Even parking grass or something?
As it is now, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, parking on grass, if it's passed by City Council, will be a 30-day misdemeanor. We would put somebody in jail for up to 30 days for parking on their front yard. So we build a case based on that, which means that we're only going after the most horrendous offenders, because the ultimate sanction is 30 days and up to 30 days in jail for that. So, you know, that's where I was looking for, you know, with the city attorney about maybe there's another way to address that, and make, you know, through some sort of civil action or whatever, where we're not looking at telling Ms. Jones, I realize you've got company over and that you parked 3 cars in your yard, but you're looking at a 30-day misdemeanor because you had company over 3 cars parked in your grass.
But we do the same thing now with grass that's too tall.
We do, yes, but that's why
we do the same thing now with a dog that continuously barks.
Correct.
We do the same thing now with a resident that has a wild party, a loud party every Friday and Saturday night. We do the same thing.
Yes.
And so I don't want to be misquoted as that
no,
this is going to be something totally different. It's not. It's just kind of broadening that scope to say that we're going to need the grass cut. We're going to need the cars not to park in the middle of the front yard. I have family members that have rental property in the city of Columbia, and they get a notice if someone starts parking in the front yard. And the city has an ordinance that says if you're going to park, you have to have a designated space marked for parking. It can be gravel, or it can be asphalt, or it can be concrete, but you will not park on the grass. And if they do, my family member will get a notice, just like we do a kind of an abatement notice. They just mail it. and they say, you know, there's a violation here, you have 30 days to rectify that, or you will have to go to court. Now, I'm assuming that that's a criminal issue, because making him come to court, it's just not done. He picks up the telephone and calls the property manager and says, Billy Bob's parking on the grass. Property manager calls Billy Bob and says, look, you know, when you rented the house, we told you you couldn't park on the grass because the city doesn't allow that. Don't park on the grass. It goes away, everything's gone. Next issue. I reckon if it happened over and over and over again, then it would be that nuisance. But
You did it to Billy Bob, or you did that to the landlord?
well, the town, or the city of Columbia, mails it to the property owner.
Okay.
The person on record that's paying that 6% taxes. And yeah, I reckon if my relative were not using a property manager, they would have to address it themselves. But he's paying a little fee to a property manager, and he picks up the phone, calls him, says, this is what I'm paying you for, take care of it. And he does. I would say that's probably the same thing that we're going to find with, in more cases than not, of the folks in Ohio. I doubt seriously somebody in Ohio is getting the check every month sent to Ohio for the rent. It probably isn't going to happen. He's probably dealing with a local real estate company that's managing properties. You know, and they may overlook it. All they're looking for is a check every month. They're not riding out checking the property, I can assure you, unless you call them. But I think if we dealt with these, you know, in-your-face items, that most of those pictures that you showed us emphasize that we would clear up over 50%, and then take a step back and look at it and say, how do we tweak this again? And I remember back years ago when we had some folks complain about parking in handicapped parking places. And we had an ordinance against it, but we had no fine for it. And we couldn't enforce it. Now, at least if they park there, we can bring them into the court and the judge can look at it and say,
$250.
right, there's a fine. And it's probably steep enough that they won't do it again, or if the fine was steep enough that it would be cheaper to pay the kid next door to cut your grass as opposed to coming to court and dealing with the judge. But I will have to say our judges are very, very lenient and working with our citizenry. No one likes to come to court, but I have been here and witnessed court more than I think everybody else combined. And one thing that people will say when they leave is, I didn't like coming, but I felt like I got a fair shake. I wasn't just a number. You know, so that's the avenue that I want to have as well. I don't want this to be a punitive area as you walk in the door, but I want them to know that we mean business and that we're doing this for their benefit and their neighbor's benefit. That's my 2 cents. But I support the landlord ordinance wholeheartedly.
I like the ordinance, and I think it's the first step. And if we pass this, and then see what we've done, and see how it's implemented, then we go to something else. Modify it, go to another area, whatever. I don't want to see any more of those pictures. That's right.
Another issue is, I've mentioned the city of Columbia, and I want to be clear, they do not use law enforcement officers. They are using, I reckon, a code enforcement officer with
civilians.
With citation privileges, or help me out here, Chief. What
I don't know, I need to call the city of Columbia and.
It's
speak
kind
to
of
them
like
how
the
to do it.
building inspector.
I think it's a completely civil violation with them, but I'm not sure if they have, I'm not sure how they've structured theirs, but they do not use certified
It's
officers.
not civil,
It's
it's
not
criminal.
civil, it's criminal.
Okay.
And,
They don't use civil-
I know that they don't use law enforcement officers. The guy has a badge, but he's not armed or she.
Right.
And I have seen them around, and they're checking grass, they're checking broken down cars, they're checking parking in the yards, that kind of thing. And they write the citations, and you appear or take care of it.
One thing I wanted to add, and I agree, we need to do something. What we're doing right now is not working. I've had calls for 4, 5, or 6 years from people that are kind of fed up and, like you said, want to move out of town because they've just given us. I think we need to do something different. Start with the property that's a rental property. I think it's a good first step, and then after that go to address the other stuff. The only thing too, and Councilman Who's mentioned it too, the unsightly and unsanitary, and even this thing here has the word not unsightly a couple times. And I think to me that's part of the big problem is, you know, somebody looks at one thing and says that's not unsightly, and somebody else says it is, and then somebody's got to make a decision, and then it's got to go to court, and the judge may or may not agree. You know, that part I think we need to fine tune more, that says grass can't be over 6 inches or 5 inches or 4 or whatever the number is. And those other things are more measurable so that Bob, if it's under code enforcement in the town or the police chief or somebody doesn't look at it and go, well, I don't think it's unsightly, or, you know, I know we had a lady email a couple of months ago who rode through there, and I think code enforcement rode through there. And out of the 5 or 6 houses on, I think it was Western Watch, wasn't that road that the lady emailed a while back on?
Yes.
You know, some of it was code enforcement about it, some of it was not. She didn't like it, no neighbors didn't like it, I didn't like it either, but it wasn't actually, or it was not, you know, I mean, somebody's got a whole bunch of kids' junk toys in the yard, how do you determine? But I think that's what we need to address better, so that the police officer or the code enforcement, whoever it is that handles that, can go out and say, no, this is not allowed. I mean, telling somebody they can't put a couch on the porch, I don't know if a judge would write them up for that. He'd probably look at it and go, hey, you know, who can't have furniture on the porch? I think he'd have to be more descriptive in the stuff so that you can tell them, no, this is not allowed, whether it's a rental home or residential or a homeowner home, none of that's allowed. But I think it's a good first start. I would just hope, and the only confusing thing I had here is on number 3 and 4. Right now, the way it's written, they're paying $50 for each dwelling, and then $50 for each lot. Is that, or those are two different things? Number 3 says they pay $50 for each dwelling.
What page are you on?
1. And then number 4 says, any landlord renting residential real estate shall pay a business license fee of $50 per parcel. So I don't know if that's, would they pay twice, or is it parcel?
I think it ought to be per dwelling unit. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I would hope that you would refer this to the planning commission and let them tweak it. I mean, this thing needs tweaking, it needs fine tuning, it needs definition, and it needs additions. There are things that are on those photographs that aren't in that ordinance.
Right.
The planning commission, a referral to the planning commission, and let them take a look at it too, and then a public comment on it.
And have the planning commission look at that unsightly. I don't know.
The way I read 3 and 4 to answer your question is 3, it says business license fee shall be paid annually in the amount of $50 for each dwelling unit subject to a residential real estate lease during the calendar year. A house on a lot. 4, during the calendar year shall pay a business license fee of $50 per parcel rented. I looked at that and at first I said, what does that mean? Well, I construed that it meant maybe like a duplex, where there's a piece of land and we got 2 rentals on that same piece of land. You know, basically that landlord has got 2 tenants. they occupy the same piece of land. If it were an apartment building, it may be 4 people, if it was a 4-plex. Granted, we don't have any of that in town, I don't think. But, you know, all 4 people would not necessarily be in violation. The person that had the garbage bags sitting out in front of their unit would have been in violation. But there has to be something, and I would ask the chief to look, and the town administrator, into some of these cities that are doing this, because I look at it kind of like the building inspector. You know, the building inspector is typically not a law enforcement officer, but they have tremendous powers. I mean, they can walk on a construction site and stop work and run everybody off until the superintendent comes out there and corrects the electrical problem or the drainage problem or the business license for the suburb that's there. So, you know, I'm not sure how that enforcement goes, but obviously they have something, and I know it's a pain for our officers, and we've tried so many different things. I know Bob has said something to all of us, I think, about looking at this or wanting to explore this issue of moving code enforcement to an administrative type thing as opposed to a law enforcement issue, and I'm not sure how that works, but I hope it does.
Well, in the city of Columbia, they got a radio to the law enforcement if they need them.
Absolutely.
I mean, but it's a standalone person, which I agree. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to look at that, but we probably need to have a person that's in charge of code enforcement and actually going through the neighborhood and enforcing our existing codes.
Right.
You know, and that's all you do. That's what you do from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. You know. And not to say that your guys ain't doing a good job, Chief, but you know, I'm sure you like to be chasing bad guys instead of looking at bad walls and bad roofs and stuff.
I've been with some of his folks when they stopped to talk to somebody about not replacing the engine in their car in the front yard, and the comment was, "Why are you hassling me? Why not just hunting the guy that broke into the house down the street?" You know. So. But I'm excited to see what comes back from the Planning Commission. I think that's a very wise decision to get another set of eyes looking at it.
We're ready to vote, and we're voting on the first reading, and then we're going to send it to Planning Commission, and then we said something about a public hearing. Would that be second or
We
third?
have a public hearing, and Planning Commission doesn't meet again until next month.
Right.
So it'll be the first Monday in May, so it'll be our first meeting in May before we can have a second meeting, if that's okay.
Okay. All right, all in favor? And item F, first reading of an ordinance 1208 to amend our town code to add or to replace inauguration meeting with general election. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion?
Only that this is what I made reference to as we voted on items A, B, and C. Under new business, that it just corrects our town code. I think that's the only place that it had an inauguration meeting. And the intent, as I understand it, is with each general election.
And the only thing I'll add, and Jake, you can chime in, and I think, and I don't know, but I would guess the reason they have it after every inauguration, which we're not going to have that meeting, or most places I don't think we have that meeting, special election, because we've only had one, and then I think Greg White was one, and I think that's
about it.
about it for how many years. Would be that, and I guess you could literally have more than one person at some point in a special election for whatever reason, that you may end up with, say, 2 people getting elected instead of 1 during special election. And I don't know if the fact that you have a quote new council, if that has anything on the bearing that that's why they wanted it that way, as opposed to waiting till the general election. Since you had new council members, then they got to quote chime in and get their say, so to speak.
You can vote to keep us every council meeting if you want to, or you can vote to renew after special elections, general elections, however, it's totally up to y'all. Again, the idea of having to reappoint after a special election seems to be somewhat of a
Silly?
yeah, because you can fire us anytime you want to anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, so I think the change makes a whole lot of sense. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Any other discussion?
But that's the way it's written right now, that's the letter of the ordinance.
That's right.
So we're just following the letter of the ordinance.
Yeah, right now
We're
it's
fixing it.
after
Right.
inauguration.
Okay.
All in favor? And item G, first reading of ordinance 1209 to amend the Irmo Town Code to add an item on Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a motion for first reading?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Anybody else? And I'll ask this too, Jake. It's my understanding that Mayor Pro Tem's responsibilities are set by state law, which basically says the Mayor Pro Tem serves in the absence or disability of the mayor.
That's correct.
So can we add to that, delete that, change that, if that's the state law?
I'm not sure. I have not actually seen this proposed ordinance. What does it basically say we're adding to?
Under our town ordinance, where it mentions the mayor's responsibilities for that, section 2, something. Our code designates what the duties of the council members are, what the duties of the mayor are. And then, in the other section, it just says the Mayor Pro Tem serves in the absence or the disability, whatever it is, of the mayor. And that's the state law that sets that.
I think this, again, please understand that when I'm asked for an opinion just off the cuff without going to the books, it is certainly subject to being changed. In my opinion, off the cuff, without looking at the books, I don't see anything that would be wrong with adding to the power of the Mayor Pro Tem, simply saying that he can also sign as well, as long as the council votes for it and provides the approval of it. I don't see where there's any problem with that. Because what it's basically saying is that all he's doing is serving a ministerial function. He can sign contracts, deeds, resolutions, proclamations, and other instruments after review and approval of council. It would be like, my job is simply to represent you legally. But if the council instructs me to sign a contract on behalf of the town, you can tell me, Mr. Moore, we as the council, as the body politic of the town of Irmo, are instructing you to sign that on our behalf. That's okay. What this is simply doing is saying the Mayor Pro Tem can sign those things that we authorize him to sign, or that we have authorized to be signed. You're simply, here, this is doing nothing but giving the Mayor Pro Tem the administrative power to execute those documents which all of a sudden are supposed to be executed.
But that would be not in the absence of the mayor.
Well,
I think what I've been told is that if we were to pass this, it goes against state law, it would be void, or it'd be null and void, whatever. And if there was anything signed, then it would be null and void on that too, because it goes against what the state has already said as what the mayor pro tem's duties are, which are nothing but to fill in place of the absence or disability.
Yeah, but right now, the mayor pro tem signs ordinances. I mean, when you weren't here, I had to sign the ordinance to,
Yeah, because I was absent, and you already had that
No.
responsibility.
when we had the ordinance to have the public hearing for the land issue, you wouldn't sign it, so I had to sign it.
No, I would sign it. You call it the resolution?
The resolution, correct?
Yeah, no, I would sign it. I asked Bob if he wanted to ask you to see if you wanted to sign it, since it was your resolution.
Okay, so
Well, then I
that's what
wouldn't
I'm
sign
saying. I'm saying, you asked if I could sign it, but
Right.
it's not spelled out in the ordinance that I could have signed it. All I'm saying is, it's gonna be spelled out here that I could sign it. It's gonna be spelled out in English so that it's followed by
But
the
it's
ordinance.
going against state law. State law says the duties of the mayor pro tem are to fill in the vacancy or the
So you're saying
disability.
I should have signed that ordinance?
No,
That resolution?
I'm talking about this thing right
No,
here.
you're saying I should have signed the resolution that had the public, when we had the public hearing?
If I was absent, then you would have been able to.
But you told me, you said ask Bob to ask me if I was
That's right,
signing
yeah.
it. And you were here, so.
No, I wasn't here. I was at my shop.
Okay.
And I was not, I could have said I was absent or whatever. I just asked him if he would ask you to see. But we're not talking about that, we're talking about this.
I would suggest that you go, assuming that there's a majority will, I would suggest that you give it first reading and let us take a look at the books and give you an opinion as to how to act at the next council meeting. First reading's fine, and we'll tell you what we think.
Yeah, because I would want to know if the state law limited it to that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Hardy, I mean, you don't have to tell me, but if you'll tell me who it is you're talking to, I'll be happy to talk with him too.
I can give you some names.
I'd love that. I mean, if anybody's got any information I don't have, that'll save us the work. But we'll see if we can't open a file on that and get Mr. Biediger back here in the law books the next day or two.
Okay. And any more discussion? All in favor? And all opposed? And item H, approval of beautification plan construction between the Royal Tower and Thames Valley. I had asked that to be on the agenda. Every year we designate X amount of dollars, I think 15,000.
15,000.
In the budget to do some beautification. And I think that beautification committee group years ago came up with a list of stuff. And I know last year we did some stuff on Woodrow Street, and they had suggested that we do that same kind of planning up to Thames Valley and then back down Thames Valley, down St. Andrews towards the post office. And I had picked those things out and asked Bob if any other councilmen had anything that they had picked out and wanted to be done. And if not, let's decide where to spend that money and kind of get it spent, so to speak. And I think he said on this one too, we would need to do a water meter.
You would have to put it, yeah, Mr. Klein, requires meters were out there because there's no other water source along the railroad tracks by the post office.
Correct.
So I think we had done it just so we could simply do a water meter and maybe a monthly bill.
That was the only requirement I had because the meter, we're going into a contract with the city of Columbia to pay water bill every month. So that's what I'm really asking for.
And I don't know what else was on that list either. I know there were different intersections and different this and different that and different projects. I think there was a couple signs on there too, bigger, permanent, more entry point signs. But I kind of felt like that was one that was in that new fire escape neighborhood too, or in that area that kind of helped pick up that area.
Is this for discussion or approval?
Well, I guess Bob needs an approval so he knows what to tell,
I need approval to order immediately.
yeah, and then to tell Red
Paying the water bill.
the stuff.
I hate to pay the water tap fee again. I wrote the check or signed the check last year. Mayor Gibbons wanted me to know how much these things cost. I remember him sending me the check, just so I know.
$2,500.
$2,500, I know, and I
Just for a
just,
tap,
yeah,
Just for the meter.
good old city of Columbia.
good old city of Columbia, they get you, yeah.
And while we're talking about, let me throw this in there. If we're gonna end up landscaping from the post office all the way down to Thames Valley, pretty massive area. And it's gonna end up requiring more than one meter. I think the smart thing may be to do is put in a well and start with that. And that way, it's a little more upfront, but long-term, you don't have any additional expenses on it. And I don't know if that meter's gonna run you, because we really don't have a plan at this point. I don't know whether that meter would run you, if it was running you $100 a month, it wouldn't make sense. But it's gonna take a whole lot more than that if you're gonna go that incredible distance with landscaping. So putting in a meter, putting in a well, you could do the whole system.
This is the post office,
Think how far that is.
Well, it's
yes,
actually from,
Blizzard's Thicket.
from Lister's Ticket down to Royal Tower, just at one side, I think, right now.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's pretty far, that is. That's a lot.
Okay, what do we do in that? What kind of landscaping or whatever?
That's my point exactly. Item H is listed on the agenda as approval, which I think would need a motion and a second. But we're already into the discussion. And, I'm not inclined to approve anything that does not come from Mr. Klein, knowing that he has plans, and he knows what we have out there. I haven't seen any kind of beautification plans, and you're looking at now immediately a $2,500 tap fee, and he's saying that it may take a second one if you want to do it. I just don't think it's been good consultation with the person that knows.
Plus, we're talking about in front of the Cotton House and Shoppers Walk.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, and
It's
it's kind
going
of a,
straight down.
Well, actually, the thing that their second phase was just the Woodrow side, and only from, whatever that road is.
I was assuming you were talking about the St. Andrews side mainly. We're talking about both sides,
I think they were talking about doing,
both sides.
well, both sides eventually, but I think they were talking about doing the Woodrow Street side because the other side has so much, I'm gonna say, trees and brush and everything else that probably would be.
So you got two sides of the road?
Yeah, well,
way down the
yeah.
road for it.
Yeah, if you-
And half of that road too, from probably where the funeral home is up, is already planted in trees, so
Yeah.
it'd be nothing there, just be the woods down that way. But I just felt like we needed something, because we got 15,000 that we need to, say, spend, or,
I'd like to see a plan, or I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but I'd like to see what this entails, or what you have in mind.
The last thing I want to see is us go in and just arbitrarily plant something and have the railroad come by and spray it. That has happened before.
yeah.
So,
No, I can't visualize it, I guess that's what I'm asking is,
he did a section down there last year next to, kind of behind your house, Harvey, that section of Woodrow Street.
have some azaleas.
Azaleas and
More peddling and stuff, yeah.
whatever else. And they just planted X amount of bushes between X amount of trees and just kind of that type thing.
How do you water off?
It's got irrigation. You've got to have, you can't do it without irrigation.
that was the word.
That's a must.
That was through Arbor Day though, wasn't it?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, that was the town's.
The town did that from the whole intersection all the way down.
That's on the church side.
This beautification committee was in 2009, it was in the council, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, a couple years ago. And I think we've done, I don't want to say half the stuff on there, but
We've done a good bit.
doing a good bit. So Bob, do you know what to do or not do?
No, sir, I don't. I mean, Mr. Klein would be the one drawing up a plan of knowing what he could plant or couldn't plant in that area, if that's what council wants us to do.
We're asking him to give us a plan then to show, or?
If that's what council wants to do, plant something over there, we need to
He's
come up with a
always
plan.
done well, but I just would like to know what this means. If I'm alone, You know, that's,
We got a lot of money, I mean, we got a big park we'll be developing soon.
yeah.
We're looking for places to spend money, that's certainly the place.
Was it 15,000 we had put aside a couple of years ago, I think. And
We spent it all last year, we spent like
Yeah.
1,800 this year, a little over 13,000 still in there.
and it was set aside just for, I want to say, just for new beautification, not maintenance, and not flower beds and that kind of stuff, but just, I would say, new projects, so to speak.
Good at parks, so we new project.
Not as new as it's gonna be.
Might transfer some money around,
Well, I think too, we were looking at the time to do some stuff in some of the neighborhoods. Even that one intersection you talked about, the Dutch Fort Baptist Church at the corner of Royal Tower and Fire Escape, that big dirt spot was one of the spots they picked out too, because it was in the neighborhood and it was a sore spot that needed some kind of beautification, I think.
I think I've seen a lot of work going on there the last few weeks.
Yeah, that, some of that is there now.
Yeah, you know, my personal opinion is that we look towards WIT to give us directions of what needs to be done next. As far as the beautification committee, that was an old committee. Don't know if there were any minutes of those meetings or anything of that nature, but, you know, obviously WIT has seen the need and knows what he can tie into. It kind of interests me now that you're talking about the possibility of another well. But I sure like the idea of pumping water out of a well and paying a water bill every month.
Yeah.
So,
Can you cross the train tracks with the line? No?
only until the train comes.
They don't like you going under your track.
You know, if you're going into the tracks.
That would be easier
Don't
said
like
than
that.
done.
No, okay.
Item I,
Where's Jake Knotts, man? You got to
Oh, Jake.
call Jakey.
It took us 2 years to get the steel picked up there.
item I is approval of two sidewalk
So wait a
plans.
minute, we're leaving H alone or what?
Yeah,
What are we doing with H?
we had a discussion on it, and I think what we left was for WIT to give us a plan, and I guess also a well cost idea, or how many.
Tell me what you want to
taps
plan,
we had to
you want to
have.
plan, tell me what you want to plan for.
We know the
Well,
well is 18 grand. I mean, that's
I
between.
think what, if I remember looking at that plan, you know, they wanted to go all the way up Woodrow and then eventually back down, St. Andrews towards the post office.
Correct.
But I don't know that you could do that for 15,000, so
No.
I think you'd have to do one side first and then one side second. And I had just thought, since you were coming up Woodrow, then do that side and then eventually do, say, in front of, whatever there's, the Sonorama place, kind of in that area there in O'Reilly's Park. Do that side.
Tell me, where do you need to start, where do you need to finish the plan?
I would say go from Royal Tower up towards Thames Valley, but only where the pine trees and all that stuff is, not where the crepe mowers are planted.
Just St. Andrews.
So you stop somewhere around the.
So you want the St. Andrews section?
No, the Woodrow.
Woodrow is what he's saying.
Yeah.
Just 12 spaces, all right.
There's one section from,
It's broken up.
yeah, I think the first half is all pine
Oh,
trees
it's
and
down by
that kind
the
of stuff.
car dealer, repair shop, okay. So does council want to do a plan, or council want to go ahead and put a well in and then come back with a plan?
Well, I think you do a plan and then you give us an idea how many taps you needed and then whether a well was the way to go or not the way to go.
I think
Lawn irrigation system.
WIT has done an excellent job. Thank you for working with the town of Irmo. I think we ought to just give them free rein to decide where to go next. To beautify, if you see fit, where you see fit. Hasn't stirred us wrong yet.
We'll be spending a lot of time in the park though, for real. soon.
That'll be fine, that'll be there, but not just that strip.
So is that it? Item I, approval to submit sidewalk grants, two of them. One for $60,000 and one for our IMAX, our part. We don't know, the total will be $60,000.
Right, our
Is
match
there
is 12,000.
a motion for the sidewalk at Palmetto Woods Parkway?
So moved.
Second.
Second. And any discussion? The one question I had, on this little map, you got the red line running all the way back in there, but I think on your.
It doesn't, it really
Stops.
Yeah, my computer is on property. It stops at the first house with the sidewalk hitting in front of all the houses.
Okay. And then it goes to Woodrow or St. Andrews?
It would go up to where the sidewalk connects at Woods Road.
Mhm.
It would go to St. Andrews, because we wouldn't get permission from the railroad for a long time.
Mhm.
We tried that before.
That neighborhood is directly behind my house. As a matter of fact, my house is right there, it's right there. And I plan to just roll right out my back door into one of the, probably in a wheelchair, into one of these houses right along in here, just to make life easy, to expedite. It's mainly an older, it's not older because they're my age. It's a young group of people out there in their early middle years, and they walk. And they want to be able to walk to the park, to walk from their house down Woodrow to the outlet. And since I may be one of those one day, I think it's a good idea to start. Plus, it's a very nice feature for the Veterans Park. And
Veterans Park.
the Veterans Park's right here.
Like where Palmetto or Wood Parkway script is.
I just think it's something that would be used. It's not a waste of money. It's something that would help people my age maintain their health. Very hard to do.
And the total sidewalk is $60,122, and our match is $12,000.
That's correct. I mean, we have to approve the full amount,
Right.
to submit the grant.
And one thing I want to ask you, just mentioned, it's difficult to get CSA. Is that why, like, up here at, when we did the sidewalk on Royal Tower,
They wanted 30,000 just to put the
just
sidewalk.
put the
there.
little section in that goes across the railroad track and ties across the road so that,
And they won't let us do it or contract. I mean, they'll do it, we have to sign a contract with them. In fact, I
Well,
still
we
got
don't
the
need to cross
contract.
that road.
No, I'm just wondering why we never did that. Because
Yeah.
if you were, say if you were in a wheelchair and you were coming down Royal Tower, and you keep going,
It stops.
you've got to go out the road and cross the road and then all that, and, you know.
You could get killed doing that.
And I was always wondering why we just didn't, because I know they do sidewalks.
Oh, they'll do it.
Across
We'll-
them.
If we want to pay for it,
The
they'll
wrong
do it.
town's a good place to get killed.
And they won't that much have to do.
I walked it.
29,000 and some change, but it was, and that was 6, 7, 8. In fact, it was Greg White.
That's when
Yeah.
Van was here.
Greg White was the one that proposed it, so that's how long ago it was. But it's probably 40,000 by now.
Okay, all in favor of doing the sidewalk at, Palmetto Wood Parkway? And the next one is for a sidewalk for Chillingham Road, St. Albans and Eastview, which basically, we've already approved the sidewalk to come down Eastview. That will stop at Battery. So this one we pick up there and go all the way over to the one on Lordship.
And this one is on our long-range sidewalk
This
plan.
one, okay. And then I think we gave a little section to go
We did,
down
we
back
had a turn
up
on
Eastview to the park.
I make a motion that we approve the sidewalk for Chillingham Road, St. Albans Road, and Eastview Drive. With a match of $18,714.
I second that too.
And any discussion? Let me get this straight in my head now. We got the Mosley and whatever that is,
Carlisle Street.
Carlisle Street. That one's in the books.
Being surveyed, that was going to be done. We've already paid for that.
And we got Brickling Road over there on,
That's paid for.
but that isn't ready to bid out yet. That's what it may be later this year.
That's correct. South Royal Tower has been paid
South.
for, and that one's been bid out, so we should have the construction starting there soon. We've already got a contractor approved.
So that would probably go next, and then Carlisle and Mosley, and then
And then we've got Eastview and College.
And then these, oh, these two colors, and then these two.
Yes, sir. We'll have a whole bunch of them.
Now, is these gonna be done, say this year, next year, or 2 or 3 years?
It'll be a while because South Royal Tower was the first one that got approved, and that was almost 3 years old now. And they haven't actually got it figured up yet.
Any more discussion?
This is huge.
Yeah, that's a long
A lot of,
one. Yeah. But, and you know, I saw some people the other day going from, I guess they've been down to, the little 7-Eleven, whatever the store is, pit stop on Royal Tower. Not Royal Tower, but, Lordship, not their Toyota dealership. Walking with 2 or 3 bags of groceries. So it is good to see people out, you know, they might want to walk to CVS now or something up that way to start using them and get them off the street driving some too. You know, and all that good stuff too.
I'm sure it'll help these people. I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think too on that east view, we were gonna do a little bit of beautification behind that. Behind where the sidewalk is and
Where the fence you're talking about?
the, east view that comes up behind,
The tree we were gonna plant
Yeah.
between the fence and the
between the fence and all that, so it'd be a little beautification project there too, probably. All in favor, show of hand. And item K, acceptance of a deeded property. We'll refer to this as the, we call it Veterans Park. Is it?
Arbor Day Veterans Park.
Yeah.
Now, that's on your iPad, the written copies you have, were the old ones, and the new ones came out on your iPad. It just changed the value of the property from the first one to the second one.
So is there a motion for acceptance of the deed?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Discussion of contracting for street cleaning. Mr. Younger, put that on, I'll let you begin.
Yes, sir.
Bob has a question for me.
Yes, sir. This,
I revised that deed.
okay.
Yeah.
Does this need to be signed and all that with a notary and all that good
I
stuff?
already got it signed, it's ready to be filed. The only thing, I don't know how you handle this, I mean, we got the $50,000. It showed up. I think that what we need to do, and I guess you can just
You can
discuss
start
this over
spending
this
it
year.
now.
Don't we need to do a line item change so we can start spending the money to do the park?
It's
Tim's
already
already done that.
Already done, thank you, sorry.
It showed up, wait, 50,000 just showed up? Just showed up?
We got the
They
grant.
said the grant that they submitted
Oh,
has been sent.
We got the money.
We need to have this happening more often, you know, things.
Tell the rest of the story, Jake. It took Jake and I, what, 10 days to get us that check?
Hey, well, you know, Jakey was a big help.
Was the vote unanimous on the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing that's so much fun about that is that the $50,000, the other money we've already got, and the money we got pledged, you know, that comes out to about $100,000 we think we already have pledged for the Veterans Park, and that will do the thing. Assuming we can do the work, we ought to have this park in the ground at no cost to the town for land acquisition or construction. We think by June maybe, which will be neat. It's a good thing.
This is not the deed for Eastview though. Is that coming?
I talked to I had the real estate agent here tonight to sign the contract. I actually had asked him to come. This guy is the greatest guy in the history of the world. He's done more than you can imagine. We're having a little bit of a difficulty with one or two of the terms that was in the contract he proposed. Bob signed the agreement tonight authorizing him to basically represent us in discussions with the bank. I'm going to open a can of worms, but there are just one or two small issues with the contract that I'm not really comfortable with. And he's gone back to the bank to see if he can't get that squared away. I think assuming we can reach one final term that we're having a little bit of difficulty with. Assuming that gets worked out tomorrow, we should be in a position to have Bob sign the contract tomorrow and close within 30 days. The only other issue we've got to do is immediately upon signing the contract, at that point in time, the real estate agent and I need to talk to the attorney who's representing the landowner that we need to get access from, but that should be relatively simple. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we can have this piece of property closed within the next 30 days. The contract's just not quite right this moment. It's just not one that you should be signing. But, and I can explain it to anybody who wants to know, but it's a technical point. It ought to be okay. And we think we've got it worked out.
Mr. Young.
All right, street cleaning is something I believe that the town needs to address. If you look at the slide here, this debris, pine straw, twigs, pine cones, you see this yard is heavily wooded, it's got pine straw on the grass, and somehow the wind just eventually gets it down here to the curb. And it stays there until rain comes, like this flood of a rain coming, it washes down to the culverts, and they get clogged up, and they overflow, and they flood people's yards. And the streets are owned by the county, not by the town, but they're not being, I just think this needs to be discussed. Something needs to be done. I'm not saying that as a town employee, they go out with, try to engage our citizens and clean, would be nice, but they have to dump it somewhere. It makes great mulch, but some people wouldn't think it would. So, we're talking about trees. We're all about trees in our town, but there are some issues as a result of trees that we need to address. And I don't know if we need to get a piece of equipment that cleans the streets, or get with a company that does it for a living and we lease them out. I don't know, but it just needs to be explored. And I would just suggest that with Klein, just in the public works, do some research on it and just report to us what should be done.
Is this something that our garbage collection group does anything with?
No.
Okay.
There's one company in town that I spoke to a couple of years ago, not in town, but in the area, just right outside of the town on St. Andrews Road. In fact, they, on the hot dog heaven there, which is in town, they park their truck there. But their equipment is mainly for like parking lots.
Right, I think we've used them with the infrastructure.
And there's a
Well, we used the
company
guy at Camden's who we used a year or two ago, and he cleaned, I think it was Camden, but anyhow, or Elgin, somewhere like that. And he's got the right piece of equipment. The guy at Hot Dog Heaven is a parking lot cleaner.
Yeah, right.
That will not pick up that. And even the street cleaning guy is going to tell you, he's not going to run his street cleaner over that much pine straw, and it's going to pop up. Pine straw's the toughest one to get up. So,
Yeah, I spoke to a guy, I want to say he was in Lancaster, I can't think of it, but it was like Carolina Street Sweeping or something. And they do a lot of stuff all over the state. But it was very aggravating talking to them. The first thing they want to know is how much money do you want to spend?
Right.
And then they'll work a plan around how much money you tell them. If you try to ask them how much do y'all charge to come do 10 miles, 20 miles, 50 miles of street, they won't answer. They came over one time last year, the year before, and did a couple days worth of street or whatever. And even in talking to them, I had asked them, like places like this, give me a price on just riding down the road, hitting everything one time, not backing up and hitting it 15 times till you got it up. And then next month or next quarter, whenever, you do it again. And eventually, after so many times, or we could eventually get rich people or somebody go out there and get that one bed spot up. But they won't give you per mile of trade. They came over here and I thought it was $700 they did in a day or two or three. I can't remember.
I think it was a day. It was even like a half a day. It wasn't. I thought we got a lot for our money. She
Yeah.
cleaned a lot.
So I think they can do a lot, but trying to get them to just tell you it's so much an hour, or so much a mile, or so much a day, it was like.
Well, the problem with that being is St. Andrews relatively easy to clean. That is going to be brutal. I mean, you could take that truck over that 5 times and not have it clean. And then, then you show up, when he shows up with a bill, and you're gonna say, well, it's still dirty out there, and that was his concern, I think.
And I think too, he said like Lakebird Boulevard, St. Andrews Road, you do those in the evening, nighttime, whatever. The residential strips, you do them during the day when most people aren't parked in the road, and try to get them done then. But there was only, I think, one company in the state, maybe 2, did it, trying to find somebody that would get it out. I even talked to the people over in Lakeland County about them contracting out to do Irmo Street, but I think they are pretty booked. They use theirs all the time.
What, do they have a big vacuum truck or something?
Yeah, big brushes.
You gotta have brushes, you gotta have water, you gotta have, I mean, it's
Vacuums
a,
and everything.
But you can't run across the grass though with that thing.
no, he's not talking about the grass, just on the
Just do
road.
the curb.
Just the curbs?
Just go down the curb.
And you can see in that picture, it's sticking out in the road 3 feet easily. Because we've gone out to some places on the short end of Chadford, it was sticking out at least 4 feet on each side. It was almost a 1-lane road, and picked it all up by hand for about 20 or 30 yards. What's that?
City of Columbia got a couple of machines, don't they?
Yeah, Old City of Columbia's got a whole crew that does nothing but that.
As much water bills we pay them, and they can't tell them what.
And it may be that it would be cost effective for us to get one, because when I started discussing about one of the companies that didn't have one, would you buy a piece of equipment and do our streets for us? They were like, oh yeah. So I kind of felt like the truck was cheaper than the contract, so there must be good.
Truck's about 80 to 100,000,
So it may be.
and it's a lot of maintenance on those trucks.
That's the thing, it's maintenance and brushes and everything else. But it sounded like
To release one?
it was
I doubt it.
a deal for them to jump into it real quick, so I thought there must be some money in there, then it must be.
Could we take one, this is gonna sound silly, but, I mean, could we take one of our cleanup days and just put everybody with a shovel and go just do it one day? I mean, we could do for our brigade, if you got enough people, we generally get 50 to 100 people show up. I mean, could we, I mean, just to get started, could we?
Some
No.
of the areas you might be able to do that. I have a terrible time in front of my house. When they resurfaced the road, they left it low right there. Water collects there, and everything down the street going towards the drain culvert stops right there. I cleaned it up today. Next week it'll be gravel and dirt and grass clippings, where people have cut their grass, get blown into the street, and it gets into the curb, then it washes down, clean it up, a couple of days, a good weekend rain, it's right back. So,
Well, I think it's a good idea, it will help. In fact, we had some neighbors over in Old Friarscape a couple of years ago on Shillingford and I think it's Charter Cross. That were having a lot of flooding over there. Some of it was just due to heavy rain in a short period of time. But some of it was due to the culverts were clogged. And water was going in them and backing back out again because the pipe down in the bottom had so much stuff in it. It was like a 3-inch pipe.
Now, generally, when that happens, we ride around in the storms when whenever we can. It hadn't rained much in the last 2 years, so that makes it kind of even harder. But if the drains, if it's clogged up, I can get the county out here, and or the state, whoever's road it is, and they'll generally get them on.
Clogged up too.
Yeah, they'll get those unclogged, so that's not an issue. It's mainly the stuff laying on the road. It's more of a visibility issue than a stormwater issue.
Well, it's gotta be some attachment out there. Maybe look up the tractor, I don't know. It's gotta be
Well,
something out there that's made that does it.
I saw one the other day in one of those magazines, government purchase, whatever, that you could put one on the front of I don't call it a forklift, but the little skeeter thing.
You could get a blower to go on the back of like a John Deere
This is a
tractor,
vacuum.
and
It did a street, but I don't know that you would do that
No.
many feet, or that many.
Yeah,
because
it'd be
the box
slow.
Would get full. I think you'd have to buy one of the big trucks that you would
An attachment to your snow.
you could do it. There's a blower attachment that goes on the back of like a John Deere tractor. The only issue with that is
You're gonna be blowing people.
you're going to blow it up into that yard there, and I don't think that yard doesn't look any better than the road.
Yeah, that's it.
But
Yeah.
that could be issues.
Well,
Yeah, they got trucks that they're still
do some
back
more
in.
research on it.
We need a big
If it comes to it where we have a cleanup day, where people would go out with rakes and you have a tractor there to scoop it, put it.
Yeah, but even when you scoop it, where are you gonna put it? I mean, we don't have a dump truck. That's a massive undertaking,
If
cleaning
we
all
had
the
a-
roads in New Friars Gate.
A contract with somebody, where we had a piece of equipment, and we did a work day to go get all the tough spots up first, and then use the contractor or our truck after that, that might be something. So they don't have to back up.
Yeah.
Doing the spot or whatever. So you're gonna get us some.
What do you want?
pricing or-
Tell me what you want.
I think
Some options.
Okay.
pricing on trucks and pricing on contracts and that kind of stuff.
All right.
Discussion on removal or disciplining council members. Mr. Walker, you put that on the agenda. I'll let you go first.
In our ordinances, since we are really stickler for the verbiage that we have in our ordinances, and we want to make sure we follow them to the letter, I noticed in there that there was no clear understanding, or I didn't have a clear understanding of what would constitute us getting in trouble with our offices. In other words, what would cause us to forfeiture our seats as council people? And let me read the city. It says forfeiture and vacancies. And this is for the mayor and council. It says that lacks at any time during his term of office any qualifications for the office as prescribed by law or the Constitution. And then it goes on to say that if you violate any express prohibition contained in South Carolina Code 1976 Title 5, which you know what that is, right, Jake? Because I don't know what that is. But this last sentence, it says, is convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. And I have no idea what that means, but I got a good quote from a good friend of mine. Well, I won't repeat what they told me what that meant, but.
He's right. That's a famous quote, but yeah, he's right.
Oh, okay. Anyway, what exactly is moral turpitude? I mean,
moral turpitude is going to be something which shows moral depravity. Stealing, lying, cheating, defrauding, illicit sexual activity, basically something that is an intentional sort of conduct which shocks the conscience and morals of the community.
But in this day and age,
the Supreme Court will tell you, and already has, you can look and you can research any crime that exists out there, and it will have been passed on, is it or is it not a crime of moral turpitude. Generally larceny, assault would not be, some sort of fraud, criminal domestic violence would not be, criminal sexual conduct would be.
Criminal domestic violence would not be.
Would not be a crime of moral turpitude. That's a crime of violence.
That's
Crime of moral
crime of
turpitude.
moral- That's not good.
Okay, but it is, at least I don't think criminal domestic violence is. It could be, but I don't think so. Now, criminal domestic violence of a high and aggravated nature probably would be. But there are generally, your major felonies are all crimes of moral turpitude: murder, rape, arson, mayhem, those sorts of things. Public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, driving under the influence, no. The crimes of moral turpitude are very easily defined. All you have to do is look.
being behind a dumpster.
No. You know, some sort of sex crime. Now you wind up with a let's see, indecent exposure could be. I can't tell you that. But any sort of larceny, stealing, those sorts of things, or any crime where you're basically engaged in moral depravity is primarily considered a crime of moral turpitude.
And this is convicted, not accused.
Right.
Okay. thought is, and again, I'd like to have council's input, because since this is a discussion, what's the South Carolina Code 76.5? What is that? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Well, Title 16 is basically going to be your criminal code sections, but Title 5 is the title which basically deals with municipal corporations and provides the qualifications for a person to hold office. If you look in Title 5, it will tell you what the qualifications are for you guys to be elected to town council. So what it's basically saying here, I believe, as I read what you were reading, is that if a person, while on council, violates a code section and is convicted of a crime that would disqualify him from serving if he were running, then that person would be disqualified from continuing to serve. So you can look at the qualifications. I mean, again, you get convicted of DUI, a misdemeanor, is that going to disqualify you? No. You get convicted of grand larceny or armed robbery, would that disqualify you from serving? Yes. And the code would be very specific on what sorts of crimes, convictions would disqualify you from serving. You can look at Title 5 and it will tell you what the qualifications are to basically serve as a council member. I believe that under Title 5, in order for you to serve as a council member, you must be a qualified elector, meaning that you may not have been convicted of any crime that would disqualify you from voting. If that's the case, then there are very specific references in the code to what sorts of prior convictions prevents one from actually voting. What that's basically saying is if you get convicted of a crime that says you no longer can vote, then you are pretty much disqualified from continuing to serve on council. As I remember the Constitution, I believe it is very specific that the party which basically has the authority to temporarily or permanently remove from office is only one person, that basically being the governor. And so I don't think that that anybody on this town council can be disqualified by vote of this town council. Now, you would have the ability to censor each other, to admonish each other, to say bad things about each other, or whatever, but you can't remove somebody from office. The only person who can do that's the governor.
That's where I'm going with this. I don't necessarily want to get somebody fired, but if you do something that we perceive as a council to be in bad taste or embarrasses the town of Irmo, we want to have the ability to censor you or...
Your only recourse as a council would be to reprimand or censure the offending party. You would have no...
And Congress has that ability to do that.
Right.
Their members, okay?
Right.
In the State House.
And the State House too, right? So, I mean, we don't, it doesn't say it in our ordinances here, and I'm just, again, to the letter of the ordinances, it doesn't, there's nothing there to authorize our council to censor anybody on this council.
Again, without doing the detailed research, but having said that I have done this research for other public bodies, my understanding is that you have, as part of your inherent authority as a council, the authority to censor each other or reprimand each other. And that's about as far as it goes. I don't think you need an ordinance basically to say that. I think you have that inherent authority as a council.
Yeah, and I'll kind of go in, according to our Constitution, anybody that is qualified to vote in any election, they're qualified to run. If they live in the town, if they're not mentally incompetent, and if they've never been convicted of a felony that says they can no longer vote. So as long as they can vote, they can run. As long as they can run, they can serve. The only person who can remove an elected official on the council, school board, town council, county council, is the governor. And that lacks at any time. What they're basically saying there is if I move out of town or you move out of town and you don't forfeit, then the town council at that time can, I don't say kick you off, but basically they can't because you don't live in town anymore. You don't meet those qualifications to serve because you don't live in town. Or if you become mentally incompetent, or if you get convicted of a felony.
Looks like I got caught smoking crack.
Brooks just handed me a code section that I swear I don't believe is here, but.
It was 57200, I think.
5-7-210, it says the council shall be the judge of the election and qualifications of its members and of the grounds for forfeiture of their office, and for that purpose shall have power to subpoena witnesses, administer oaths, and require the production of evidence. A member charged with conduct constituting grounds for forfeiture of his office shall be entitled to a public hearing, and notice of such hearing shall be published in one or more newspapers of general circulation in the municipality at least 1 week in advance of the hearing. Decisions made by the council under this section may be appealed to the Court of Common Pleas, and I swear I have no idea where that code section came from. I've never seen it in my life.
Right up above it is 200, which basically says how a council member, elected official can be. You're right, in that 4 members cannot kick off any elected official. The people's elected them. But if a council member has moved out of town or has become mentally incompetent or incompetent or whatever, or has been convicted of, then the council can act as a judge to remove them. But if those other things haven't been met, then only the governor can remove someone.
But as far as
now you can censure anybody,
censure, right.
but a censor is about as good as this piece of paper here that this is written on too, because there's got no force, nobody. I mean, we can censor anybody, and they can go on their nose if it's all they want to too.
There's no way.
Yes, I mean, it just doesn't have. But if that were the case, then any time a council, whether it's county council, school board, or whoever, elected a Mormon, or elected a Muslim, or elected a Mexican, or an African American, then the other, quote, people could just kick them off because they don't like them. And the law doesn't, it doesn't allow that. You gotta either be mentally incompetent or one of the other things as far as criminal thing. And that's basically it.
Hardy, this thing seems to say, honest to God, I think it may violate the Constitution, but again, Brooks is back here with the web. 5-7-200 seems to say that at any time a mayor or councilman forfeits his office if he lacks at any time the qualifications for office. That'd be like if he
Moved out of town.
violates an express provision of chapters 1 to 17. Whatever 1 to 17, that includes the criminal code. No, it doesn't. That's titled. Chapters 1 to 17, I don't know what those would be 5-1.
Yeah.
Okay. Or is convicted of any crime involving moral turpitude. Then it goes on to say the council is the judge of the election and qualification. And, the English translation is, if you ever get to that point, which I hope the heck you don't, the Constitution and the code sections are going to govern anyway. You don't need to add anything to the town code now. Hopefully we'll never get here. But according to this, what I told you initially is totally wrong, and that it is up to the town council. The body I've done this for was not a city council. It was another public body. And this apparently is a specific law dealing with the mayor and council members. Apparently what happens is that y'all do have the right, if you find somebody's.
Yeah, if they're moved out of town and they don't forfeit, then the council can step in. Or if somebody's running for office and they don't live in the town, or they get elected and they don't live in the town, or they have a criminal offense or whatever, or what are the other things, mentally incompetent, then they can step in at that time and judge the election and say, no, you can't serve.
And I think if it's found that the council member is convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, those are very easy. I mean, I don't think any of y'all are going to do that anytime soon. So I think the English translation is, I don't think you need any specific code language to do that. I think whatever the law is already in the code and the Constitution. And I thank Brooks for showing me this, because he, again, shows that I can make errors from time to time. But Brooks corrected.
Any other discussion? We are at presentation by citizens. This is the point of the meeting where anyone who wants to come address council on anything tonight, whether it's on the agenda or not on the agenda or whatever, has the opportunity to do so. Is there anyone who would like to come speak to the council? Being none, is there a motion for adjournment?
Second.
So adjourned.
I like that. I get to make it, let me do no packets.
What is that?
But I like these little packets.
Okay, Brooks, how are you doing?
Well, y'all notice, I actually had my thing open.